She found a tracker. What it revealed about her billionaire husband was beyond imagination. The rain hammered against the gallery windows as I stood between two men who both claimed to know the truth about my life. One was my husband. The other was the enemy sent to destroy him. And I had no idea which one was lying. Marcus stepped forward, his voice cutting through the darkness. Your husband is not who you think he is, Isabel. His real name is Alexander Koslov. He was Russian intelligence, deep cover operative. Everything you know about him is a fabrication. I turned to Adrian, my husband of 3 years, the man who'd built me a private gallery and promised me forever. My voice cracked. Tell me he's lying. Tell me this is insane. But Adrian didn't deny it. His face was pale, his hands visible at his sides like a man surrendering. The initial approach was manufactured, he said quietly. I was assigned to monitor you, to protect you. But Isabel, what happened between us became real. I felt my world tilting. Assigned to me? Our wedding was assigned? Marcus's voice came again, sharp and calculated. He's been lying to you since the day you met. The gallery, the storm, the coincidence. All of it planned. You're not his wife. You're his mission. Adrian's voice turned to steel. If she were just a mission, I would have extracted what I needed years ago and disappeared. I married her because I love her. Then prove it, Marcus challenged. Walk away. Let her go. Let her have a real life. Adrian's expression broke. If I walk away, organizations like yours will assume she knows everything. She'll never be safe. I can't protect her if I'm not close. How convenient, Marcus said with a cold smile. I looked between them. The husband who'd tracked my movements. The operative who'd befriended me to get to him. Both of them using me. Both of them claiming protection. And in my purse was the tracker I'd found that morning. The tiny device that had started unraveling everything I thought was true. Stop, I said, my voice stronger than I felt. Both of you, stop talking about me like I'm not here. Like I'm something to be protected or leveraged or controlled. I'm a person, and I deserve the truth. But here's what I didn't know yet. Here's what I couldn't have imagined as I stood in that dark gallery. Rain falling like the end of the world. The truth was so much bigger than a tracking device. So much darker than a husband with secrets. And the choice I was about to make would change everything. Let me take you back to where this really started. Not in the gallery with Marcus and Adrian facing off like wolves over territory, but earlier, in a closet, with a device smaller than a button, and the slow, creeping realization that the man I loved had been watching me all along. My name is Isabel Morrow, and this is the story of how I discovered that my perfect marriage was built on the most elaborate lie imaginable, and what I did about it. If you've ever questioned whether someone was too good to be true, hit that like button right now, because this story is going to take you on a journey you won't forget. Trust me, you'll want to stick around until the end. What my husband was really hiding goes deeper than you could ever imagine. 3 days before I found the tracker, I was blissfully ignorant. I was Isabel Castellane, wife to Adrian Castellane, billionaire CEO of Castellane Technologies. We lived in a Manhattan penthouse with views of Central Park. I had a private gallery space where I curated exhibitions. My life was the kind other people envied. But 3 years before that, I was just Isabel Morrow. And my life looked nothing like a fairy tale. I grew up in a modest neighborhood in Queens. My father died when I was 16. A car accident on a rainy Tuesday that took him from us without warning. My mother tried to hold things together, but grief does strange things to people. Within 2 years, she started forgetting things. Small things at first. Where she put her keys. What day it was. Then bigger things. My name. Who I was. Early onset Alzheimer's. That's what the doctors called it. I called it the second loss of a parent, except this one happened slowly, piece by piece, memory by memory. I put myself through college working 3 jobs. I studied art history because it was the one thing that made sense to me. Art didn't forget. Art didn't leave. A painting was the same today as it would be tomorrow. There was comfort in that permanence. By the time I was 28, I was working as a curator at a small gallery in Brooklyn. I lived in a 5th-floor walk-up with no elevator. I ate ramen more nights than I care to admit. I visited my mother at a care facility I could barely afford, sitting with a woman who looked at me like a friendly stranger. But I had my work. I had artists whose vision I believed in. I had a life that was small but mine. And then one winter evening, everything changed. It was February, the kind of cold that bites through your coat and settles in your bones. A storm was rolling in, the sky dark and threatening. I was alone in the gallery. We'd just acquired a collection from a Brazilian sculptor named Domingues. Most people had never heard of him, but his work spoke to me. Raw emotion carved into metal and stone. I was studying one of his pieces when the door opened. Wind rushed in, carrying snow and cold air. And a man. He was tall, dark hair dusted with snow, wearing an expensive coat but looking somehow vulnerable. Lost, almost. "I'm sorry," he said, stamping snow from his shoes. "I saw the lights. I was hoping to wait out the storm." Of course, I told him. "Take your time." He walked slowly through the gallery, hands in his pockets, looking at each piece with genuine attention. Not the glazed expression of someone killing time. Real interest. He stopped in front of the Domingues sculpture I'd been studying. A figure emerging from rough stone, half-formed, caught between imprisonment and freedom. "This is remarkable," he said. "The way he captures the moment of transformation. Not the before or after, but the actual breaking free." I moved closer, surprised. Most people don't see that. They just see an unfinished sculpture. He smiled. "It's not unfinished. It's intentionally incomplete. The artist is saying that transformation is a permanent state. We're always half-emerged, always breaking free from something." We talked for 2 hours. About art, about Domingues's philosophy, about the difference between creating beauty and creating truth. He was brilliant, thoughtful. He asked questions that made me think differently about work I'd studied for years. When the storm finally let up, he paused at the door. "I'm Adrian," he said. "Would you have dinner with me sometime?" "I'm Isabel," I replied. And yes, it wasn't until our third date that I learned who he really was. We were at a small Italian restaurant in the village. Intimate, quiet, the kind of place where you could talk for hours. We'd just finished dessert when I noticed people staring, whispering. Then the paparazzi appeared outside. Cameras flashing through the windows. Adrian's expression shifted. Resigned. "I should have told you before," he said quietly. "I'm not exactly anonymous." He explained. Castellane Technologies. Cybersecurity and artificial intelligence. His face on magazine covers. His company's worth billions. I'd been completely oblivious. "I can leave," I told him. "If this life, the attention, if it's too much for you. I understand." But he reached across the table and took my hand. "I don't want you to leave. I want you to understand what you're choosing. The scrutiny. The lack of privacy. People assuming things about you." I looked at this man who'd spent 2 hours in my gallery talking about art. Who'd asked about my mother with genuine compassion. Who'd listened when I talked about my father's death like it actually mattered. "I'm choosing you," I said. "Not the attention. You." The next 6 months were a blur. Adrian pursued me with focus that should have felt overwhelming but instead felt like finally being seen. He remembered everything. The fact that I took my coffee with cream, no sugar. That my father had loved Miles Davis. That I'd always wanted to visit the Uffizi Gallery in Florence. He sent me first editions of art books I'd mentioned once in passing. He arranged private viewings at museums after hours. He asked about my mother's care and made discreet calls that got her into a better facility. I thought it was love. Attention and generosity born from genuine feeling. I never questioned how he knew so much. How he remembered such specific details. How he could arrange things that seemed impossible. I just thought I'd gotten lucky. Finally, after years of loss and struggle, something good was happening to me. The proposal came 8 months after we met. No grand gesture. No public spectacle. Just the two of us in my tiny apartment. He got down on one knee on my worn carpet, between my second-hand couch and the bookshelf I'd built from cinder blocks and planks. "Isabelle Moreau," he said, "will you build a life with me?" I started crying before he even opened the ring box. And when he did, I stopped breathing. It was my grandmother's ring. An emerald surrounded by small diamonds. The ring had been sold years ago during my family's financial crisis. I thought it was gone forever. How did you find this? I whispered. I find things, Adrian said softly. This is what I do. I should have paid more attention to that sentence. I find things. This is what I do. But I was too busy crying, too overwhelmed with joy, too grateful that this brilliant, generous man wanted to marry me. Yes, I told him. Yes, of course, yes. We married 3 months later. Small ceremony, close friends only. Adrian's business associates. A few artists I'd worked with. My sister, though my mother was too far gone to attend. She wouldn't have known what she was watching anyway. The wedding was beautiful, simple and elegant. Adrian's vows made me cry. He promised to protect me, to cherish me, to build a life where I never felt alone again. I believed every word. Our marriage was good, not perfect. Adrian worked constantly. He traveled for business several times a month. There was a part of his life that remained private, walled off. His study was his sanctuary. His work was compartmentalized. But he was gentle with me, patient. When I had bad days, when my mother didn't recognize me and I came home devastated, Adrian held me and let me cry. He never told me to get over it or move on. He just held me. He built me a private gallery space in our penthouse. An entire room with perfect lighting and climate control where I could curate smaller exhibitions. He encouraged my work. He celebrated my successes. He made me feel valued, seen, loved. But there were small things. Things I noticed but explained away. He always knew where I was. Even when I hadn't told him my plans, he'd text at exactly the right moment. How's the meeting going? Or enjoy the museum. When I asked how he knew, he'd smile. Lucky guess. Or I pay attention. He remembered things I'd mentioned once, years ago. People from my past I'd barely talked about. Details about my childhood that I couldn't remember telling him. Once, I mentioned wanting to see a specific Frida Kahlo exhibit in London. Just a passing comment over breakfast. The next week, Adrian had business in London. What a coincidence, he'd said. We should go together. These things felt like love. Like a man who paid attention to his wife. It never occurred to me that it might be something else. Something darker. And then there was Marcus. Marcus Delacroix appeared in my life 2 months before I found the tracker. He started attending the small exhibitions I curated at various galleries around the city. Always alone. Always well-dressed. Always watching. The first time we spoke, he approached me after an opening. Beautiful collection, he said. You have an eye for artists on the verge of discovery. Thank you, I replied. Are you a collector? Among other things. He handed me a card. Marcus Delacroix. Art acquisition and consulting. We started having coffee. Ostensibly to discuss artists and potential purchases. He bought a significant piece from one of my exhibitions. A sculpture that cost more than I used to make in a year. But the conversations felt like more than art talk. He asked about my life. About Adrian. Your husband is a fascinating man, Marcus said during our third coffee meeting. Does he ever talk about his work? The real work, I mean, not the corporate publicity. What do you mean, the real work? I asked. Marcus smiled. Just curious how much you know about the empire you married into. Something about the question unsettled me. That night, I mentioned Marcus to Adrian. Casually. Testing his reaction. There's a man named Marcus Delacroix who's been coming to my exhibitions. He bought the Kowalski sculpture. Do you know him? Adrian's expression went carefully blank. Just for a second. Then he smiled. Doesn't ring a bell. Sounds like someone trying to network. Get close to you to get to me. I wouldn't engage too much. But his face had done something. A micro-expression of recognition before the smile. He knew who Marcus was. I was certain of it. Why lie about it? That question sat in the back of my mind for weeks. A small seed of doubt. Nothing big enough to make me question everything. Just enough to make me pay closer attention. And then came the morning I found the tracker. It was a Tuesday. Adrian had left for Singapore 2 days earlier. Some business deal that required his physical presence. He'd be gone for a week. I was getting dressed for a gallery meeting. I'd chosen my favorite bag. The vintage Hermes that Adrian had given me for our second anniversary. I was looking for my earring. The small pearl studs my mother had given me before she got sick. I'd worn them the day before and thought I'd put them in my jewelry box. But they weren't there. I checked the bag, thinking maybe I'd dropped them inside. I emptied the contents onto the bed. Wallet, phone, lipstick, keys. And then I felt something odd in the lining. A small bump, almost imperceptible. I turned the bag inside out. There, adhered to the interior lining with some kind of industrial adhesive, was a device. Smaller than a button. Black, with a tiny LED light that wasn't currently lit. My hands started shaking before my brain fully processed what I was looking at. A tracker. Someone had put a tracking device in my bag. I sat down hard on the edge of the bed. My heart was hammering. My breath coming short. Who would do this? When? How long had it been there? And then the worst question. The one that made me feel sick. Was it Adrian? I picked up my phone. My first instinct was to call him. To demand an explanation. But something stopped me. If Adrian had put this in my bag, and I called him about it, what would he say? He'd explain it away. He'd have some reason that sounded perfectly logical. And I'd want to believe him so badly that I would. I needed to know the truth before I confronted him. I needed evidence. Adrian was in Singapore for another 5 days. I had time. I carefully placed the tracker back exactly where I'd found it. If someone was monitoring, I didn't want them to know I'd discovered it. Then I sat in our bedroom, in our penthouse with its million-dollar views, and I started thinking about everything differently. The way Adrian always knew where I was. Not love. Surveillance. The way he remembered everything. Not attention. Research. The way he'd found my grandmother's ring. Not romantic effort. Investigation. Marcus's question. Does he ever talk about his work? The real work? What was Adrian's real work? I looked around our bedroom. Suddenly, every gift felt suspect. Every piece of furniture could be hiding something. Every surface could be concealing secrets. I'd been living in this beautiful cage, thinking it was a home. What else had I missed? I stood up, walked out of the bedroom, down the hall, to the one room I'd never felt entirely comfortable entering. Adrian's study. The door was closed but not locked. I'd been in here before, of course, but always when Adrian was present. Always as a guest in his space. Now I opened the door and really looked. The room was immaculate. Dark wood desk. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the park. Bookshelves lined with first editions and art books. Filing cabinets. A safe built into the wall. I'd never questioned any of it. Successful men had studies. Private spaces for work. But now I saw it differently. This wasn't just a study. This was a vault. I walked to the desk. Tried the drawers. Locked. All of them. The filing cabinets. Locked. The safe. Obviously locked. Adrian kept keys somewhere. I'd seen him access these things. Where? I searched the obvious places first. The desk organizer. The bookshelf. Nothing. Then I remembered. There was a small wooden box on one of the shelves. Japanese carved wood. Beautiful craftsmanship. I'd asked about it once. Adrian had said it was a gift from a business associate in Tokyo. I took it down. Opened it. Inside were various keys. Some I recognized. The key to our storage unit. The key to his car. Others I didn't know. I tried them systematically. The third key opened the desk's main drawer. Inside were manila folders. Physical files in an age when everything was digital. Why keep physical records unless you needed something that couldn't be hacked or traced? The first folder had my name on it. Isabel Morrow. Not Isabel Castellane. My maiden name. My hands were shaking again as I opened it. Inside were documents about my life. Going back years. Before I'd met Adrian. My university transcripts from a decade ago. My employment history. Photographs of me at different ages. Some I recognized from my own albums. Others I'd never seen. Me at my college graduation. Me at a gallery opening 6 years ago. Me having coffee with friends. Someone had been documenting my life. Researching me. Watching me. There was a copy of my father's death certificate, the police report from his accident, my mother's medical records from her Alzheimer's diagnosis. Everything. Someone had compiled everything about me. And this folder was in Adrian's desk. I felt bile rising in my throat. This wasn't normal. This wasn't a husband learning about his wife. This was surveillance. Investigation. Like I was a subject. A case file. Why? I grabbed the next folder. It was labeled Helena Moreau. My mother. Inside were similar documents. But these went back further. To before I was born. My mother's employment history. State Department. I'd known she worked there. Administrative work, she'd always said. Filing. Secretarial duties. But these documents told a different story. Security clearances. Level classifications I didn't understand but recognized as high level. Travel records to places like Moscow, Berlin, Cairo. Encrypted communication logs. My mother hadn't been administrative staff. She'd been intelligence. I sat down in Adrian's chair, my legs suddenly unable to support me. My mother had been some kind of intelligence officer, working in counterintelligence according to these files, tracking foreign operatives, deep cover agents. Why had I never known this? Why had she told me it was just administrative work? And why did Adrian have all of this information? My mother's Alzheimer's diagnosis was in the file, but there were notes beside it in handwriting I didn't recognize. Questions. Was the onset truly natural? Any indication of chemical or environmental factors? Someone had questioned whether my mother's disease was really disease at all. I felt cold. Truly cold, like the temperature in the room had dropped 20 degrees. I grabbed the next folder. This one was labeled Project Meridian. Inside were surveillance photographs. Dozens of them. All of Marcus Delacroix. Marcus in Paris. Marcus in New York. Marcus meeting with various people I didn't recognize. Each photo annotated with dates, times, locations. There was a dossier. Professional. Detailed. Marcus Delacroix. Real name confirmed. Former French intelligence. DGSE. Left official service 6 years ago. Currently freelance operative specializing in corporate espionage, technology theft, and information extraction. Known associate of international syndicate operating under designation covenant. Network engaged in technology acquisition, market manipulation, blackmail, and strategic intelligence gathering. Approach to subject Isabel Castellane documented March 15th. Pattern of contact established through gallery exhibitions. Assessment. Attempting to cultivate relationship to gain access to Adrian Castellane's systems and networks through wife. Subject's psychology profile suggests she will respond to perceived friendship and intellectual engagement. High probability of exploitation if contact continues. Protective counter-surveillance authorized. Subject Isabel must not be made aware of threat. She will attempt to handle situation herself and increase her risk exposure. The note at the bottom was in Adrian's handwriting. I recognized his precise script. Must not let her know. She'll try to help and put herself at risk. Continue monitoring. Intervene only if necessary. I stared at the page. Marcus wasn't a friendly art collector. He was an operative. Sent by some organization called Covenant to get to Adrian through me. And Adrian had known. He'd been watching. Protecting me from a threat I didn't even know existed. That should have felt comforting. My husband protecting me from danger. But it didn't, because he'd been watching me long before Marcus appeared. The files on me went back years. Before we met, I grabbed another folder. This one simply labeled IM. My initials. Inside was a document that looked official, like a briefing file. Mission designation. Guardian Protocol. Objective. Provide protective surveillance for Isabel Moreau, daughter of former counterintelligence officer Helena Moreau. Subject's identity compromised following mother's investigation into Russian deep cover operatives. Multiple threat assessments indicate subject may be targeted for leverage or information extraction. Protection detail assigned. Asset Sentinel. My eyes caught on that word. Asset. Below it, in smaller text. Adrian Castellane, deep cover placement, corporate sector. The document was dated 7 years ago, 2 years before I'd met Adrian. I read it again and again. Each time the words rearranged everything I understood about my life. Adrian had been assigned to protect me. Before we ever met. Before the gallery. Before the storm. He hadn't walked into my gallery by chance. He'd been watching me. Assigned to watch me. Our meeting was planned. Manufactured. A mission objective. The romantic story I told myself about fate and coincidence and love at first sight was a lie. I'd been an assignment. The room was spinning. I gripped the edge of the desk, trying to breathe, trying to process. Every moment of our relationship was suddenly suspect. The hours in the gallery talking about art. Had he researched Dominguez beforehand? Learned what to say to make me interested? The dinner conversations where he seemed to know exactly what questions to ask. Had he studied me? Prepared? The proposal with my grandmother's ring. Had finding it been surveillance skills, not romantic effort? I married you because I love you. That's what he'd said in his vows. But how could I believe it now? How could I trust any of it? The worst part was I didn't even know who Adrian really was. Asset Sentinel. Deep cover placement. What did that mean? I kept searching. Folder after folder. Each one revealing another layer of deception. There was a folder on Adrian himself. Or rather, on someone named Alexander Koslov. Inside were documents in Russian. I couldn't read them, but I recognized official seals. Government documents. There were photographs. A younger Adrian, maybe early 20s, in military uniform, in what looked like training facilities, meeting with men in suits who had the bearing of intelligence officials. One document had been translated, a service record. Alexander Dmitry Koslov, recruited into Foreign Intelligence Service at age 18, specialized training in deep cover operations, technology acquisition, long-term infiltration. Assigned to Western Placement Program at age 22. Established cover identity as technology entrepreneur. Objective: gather intelligence on Western technology companies. Recruit assets. Acquire proprietary information. Asset went dark from handlers in 2009. Current status: unknown. Presumed to have defected or been compromised. I stared at the photograph of young Adrian. Alexander. Whatever his real name was. The man I'd married wasn't just keeping secrets. He wasn't even who he claimed to be. Adrian Castellane was a cover identity. A constructed person built around someone named Alexander Koslov who'd been Russian intelligence. And he'd been assigned to watch me because my mother had been hunting people exactly like him. The symmetry was almost beautiful in its cruelty. My phone buzzed. A text message. From Marcus. I know you found something. We need to talk. Your husband isn't who you think he is. Meet me at the gallery. Come alone. I can tell you the truth. I looked at the message, then at the files spread across Adrian's desk. Marcus, who was an operative for Covenant, trying to use me. Adrian, who was Alexander Koslov, who'd been assigned to watch me and married me as part of what? Extended cover? Long-term mission? Everyone was lying. Everyone had agendas. And I was the person in the middle, the target, the assignment, the leverage. For the first time in my life, I felt truly alone. Not sad alone. Not grief alone. Dangerous alone. I had no idea who to trust. The enemy who admitted he was an enemy? Or the husband who'd built our entire relationship on lies? But I knew one thing. I was done being the person things happened to. The assignment. The target. The protected subject who wasn't allowed to know she needed protection. I was going to take control of my own story. Starting now. I left my phone on the penthouse kitchen counter. If Adrian was tracking it, he'd think I was home. I took cash from the emergency fund I kept in my closet. I wore a hooded coat. I took a taxi, paid in cash, and headed to the gallery. If Marcus wanted to talk, we'd talk. And I'd decide for myself what was truth and what was manipulation. The rain had started again by the time I reached the gallery. The city was gray and blurred. Water running down windows. Street lights reflecting in puddles. The gallery was dark. I'd expected that. I had keys. I let myself in through the back entrance. Marcus was waiting in the main room. He stood by the windows, backlit by the emergency exit sign, his silhouette sharp and still. "You came alone," he said without turning around. "Smart. Can't be sure who's listening otherwise." I closed the door behind me. "Tell me the truth. About Adrian. About why you're really here." Marcus turned. His face was serious. "How much did you find?" "Enough to know you're not an art collector. Enough to know Adrian has files on both of us. Enough to know my mother worked in intelligence. Now tell me the rest." He studied me for a long moment. Then he nodded. "Your husband is a ghost, Isabel. Adrian Castellane, the billionaire tech CEO, exists on paper. But the man you married is someone else entirely." He pulled out a tablet, showed me documents, photographs, records. "His real name is Alexander Koslov, former operative for Russian foreign intelligence. He was sent west 15 years ago to infiltrate the technology sector. He was supposed to steal intellectual property, recruit sources, gather intelligence on American tech companies. I already knew this from the files, but hearing it spoken out loud made it more real." "And then what?" I asked. "Then he went dark. Disappeared from his handlers in 2009. They assumed he'd been compromised or killed. But he wasn't dead. He'd become Adrian Castellane. He'd used everything he'd stolen and learned to build a real technology empire. He made himself legitimate, or so it appeared. The photographs Marcus showed me were damning. Young Alexander in Russia, in training facilities, in meetings with intelligence officials. And then later photographs. Alexander becoming Adrian. The transformation documented in stages. "Why are you showing me this?" I asked. "Because Covenant wants to bring him in. He knows too much. He's been playing multiple sides for too long. We thought we could get to him through you. But then what?" Marcus's expression shifted. Something almost like sympathy. "But then we realized he actually cares about you. Which is either his weakness we can exploit, or leverage you can use." "What does that mean?" "It means your husband, whatever his real name is, has been living a lie for 15 years. But you're the one thing in his constructed life that might have become real. He was supposed to get close to you because of your mother's intelligence work. To monitor if she'd leaked anything before her Alzheimer's. But somewhere along the way, his feelings became genuine." "How do you know that?" I demanded. A new voice cut through the darkness. "Because if it were still just a mission, I would have extracted the information I needed years ago and disappeared." I spun around. Adrian stood in the doorway. He must have come in through the front. Silent. I hadn't heard him. He looked exactly as he always did. Expensive coat. Perfect posture. Calm expression. But I saw him differently now. Not my husband. Someone dangerous. Someone capable of deception at the highest level. "Don't come closer," I said. My voice was shaking but firm. Adrian stopped. He held his hands out, visible, showing he wasn't a threat. "Isabel, please, let me explain." "Explain what?" I asked. My anger was rising now, flooding through the shock. "Explain that our entire relationship is a lie? That you were assigned to me like I was a job?" "It started as an assignment," Adrian said. His voice was raw in a way I'd never heard. "I was supposed to monitor you. Make sure you weren't a security liability. Gather information about what your mother might have known before her diagnosis." He took a breath. "But Isabel, what happened between us became real. You became real. Everything I feel for you is real. How can I believe anything you say?" The words came out broken. "You've been lying since the moment we met. The gallery, the storm, the coincidence. All of it manufactured." "Yes." Adrian's voice was quiet but steady. "The initial approach was manufactured. But everything that came after, falling in love with you, marrying you, building a life with you, that was me choosing you over everything else. I've been protecting you from people like Marcus because you're the most important thing in my world. People like me," Marcus interjected, "who want to stop someone like him from continuing to manipulate markets and governments from his technology empire. He's not protecting you out of love, Isabel. You're an asset. A valuable one, but still just an asset. That's not true, Adrian said. There was steel in his voice now. If she were just an asset, I would have activated the extraction protocol the moment Covenant made contact. I didn't because I won't risk her safety. Then prove it, Marcus challenged. Walk away. Let her go. If she's not just part of your cover, release her from this marriage and let her live a normal life. Adrian's face went pale. You know I can't do that. If I walk away, Covenant will assume she knows everything. She'll never be safe. You'll use her to get to me or eliminate her to send a message. Convenient, Marcus said with a cold smile. I stood between them, two men discussing my fate like I was a chess piece, and something inside me hardened. Both of you stop, I said. My voice cut through their argument. Stop talking about me like I'm not here, like I'm something to be protected or leveraged or controlled. I looked at Adrian, at this man I'd loved, this stranger wearing my husband's face. You owe me the complete truth, I said. Everything. Every lie, every manipulation, every reason. Then I turned to Marcus. And I'm not going to betray my husband based on documents and accusations from someone who admits he was sent to manipulate me. Back to Adrian. Come home. Show me everything. Then I'll decide what happens next. And if you choose to leave? Adrian's voice was barely above a whisper. Then, I said, my voice steady despite my shaking hands, you'll have to live with the consequences of building a marriage on lies. I turned to Marcus. What happens to me if I go with you instead? Covenant will protect you, Marcus replied. We'll help you disappear. Start over. Away from all of this. But you'd want information, I pressed. About Adrian. About his systems. About his networks. I'd just be trading one handler for another. Marcus didn't deny it. His silence was answer enough. I made my decision, not based on trust. I didn't trust either of them, but based on 3 years of evidence. Adrian had had countless opportunities to hurt me, to use me, to take whatever he wanted. Instead, he'd built me a gallery. He'd cared for my mother. He'd held me when I cried. If it was all performance, it was the most elaborate and pointless one imaginable. I'm going home with Adrian, I announced, to hear everything. But Marcus, I want you to know something. I looked directly at him. If he hurts me, if this is another manipulation, I will burn his entire empire down myself. And I'll call you to help. Marcus smiled. It was genuine this time. That's the smart play. Just remember, when billionaires tell you they love you, always check what they're really buying. Then he was gone, melting into the shadows like he'd never been there. I turned to Adrian. Let's go. And you better start talking in the car, because I want every truth you've ever hidden from me. All of it. Or I walk, and you never find me again. Agreed, Adrian said softly. His expression was devastated but determined. We walked to his car in silence. The rain had intensified, water sheeting down. The city blurred and distorted. The car was waiting. Bulletproof, I now realized. The driver wasn't just a driver but security. Everything I'd taken as luxury was actually protection. Or control. I still wasn't sure which. Adrian and I sat in the back seat. I pressed myself against the far door, as far from him as possible. The car started moving. Rain drummed on the roof, and Adrian began talking. My name is Alexander Dmitry Koslov, he said. I was born in Moscow. My father was a mid-level government official. My mother was a music teacher. I had a sister, Katya, 2 years younger than me. He stared out the window as he spoke. At the rain, at the city lights. I was recruited into foreign intelligence at 18. They identified me as having aptitude for long-term deep cover work. I could learn languages quickly. I could adapt to different environments. I could become whoever I needed to be. They trained me for 4 years. Languages, technology, cultural immersion, how to think like a Westerner, how to build a cover identity that would withstand scrutiny. At 22, they sent me west, to America, with instructions to establish myself in the technology sector, to gather intelligence, to steal intellectual property, to recruit sources. Everything Marcus told you is true. I did steal IP. I did use that stolen technology to build my initial companies. I was a Russian intelligence operative pretending to be an American entrepreneur. And you were good at it, I said. My voice was flat. I was excellent at it, Adrian corrected. I built Adrian Castellane into someone real. Someone successful. Someone above suspicion. But intelligence agencies don't let their assets just retire. Even when you're useful, you're disposable. I realized my handlers would use me until I was compromised. Then discard me. Probably eliminate me to clean up loose ends. So in 2009, I went dark. I destroyed my communication channels. I made myself appear dead or compromised. And I rebuilt my life as legitimately as possible. That's when your mother became a problem. I felt my breath catch. Helena Moreau worked in counterintelligence, Adrian continued. She specialized in identifying deep cover operatives. She was brilliant at it. 15 years ago, she started getting close to identifying me. Not Adrian Castellane, but the operative behind the identity. He finally looked at me. His eyes were haunted. I was ordered to eliminate the threat. You were going to kill my mother, I said. The words felt unreal. I was supposed to, Adrian corrected quietly. But I researched her first. That's protocol. Know your target before engagement. And I found out about you. About a 20-year-old woman who just lost her father. Who was working 3 jobs to get through college. Who was trying to care for her mother while grieving. Who was innocent of everything except being Helena Moreau's daughter. I couldn't do it, Isabel. I couldn't kill your mother and destroy you in the process. You'd already lost your father. I couldn't make you lose your mother too. So what did you do? I destroyed her research instead. I made the leads she was following look like dead ends. False positives. I convinced my former handlers that she was chasing ghosts. That she wasn't actually close to anything real. And then I walked away. But I kept monitoring the situation. Making sure no one else went after her. When her Alzheimer's diagnosis came, I made sure she got into the best care facility. Anonymously funded. I'd been protecting both of you for years before we ever met. My head was spinning. This man had been assigned to kill my mother. And instead he'd saved her. And watched over both of us. So when you walked into my gallery, I'd already been protecting you for years, Adrian said. I maintained distance for your safety. But then there was a credible threat. A Chechen group had discovered your mother's identity. They thought they could leverage her daughter for information or revenge. I had to get close. To assess the threat level. To protect you directly. His voice dropped. I walked into your gallery planning to look around and leave. To establish a visual baseline and set up a protective perimeter. I was going to spend maybe 15 minutes there. Then disappear. Continue protecting you from a distance. But then you started talking about Dominguez. About transformation and breaking free. And you looked at me like I was just a person. Not a mark. Not a threat. Not an assignment. You looked at me like I mattered. He turned to face me fully. I fell in love with you that afternoon, Isabel. Not over time. Not as part of a plan. Immediately. Completely. In a way that terrified me because I'd never felt anything real before. I kept coming back because I couldn't stay away. I pursued you because I needed you. I married you because walking through life without you seemed impossible. But you never told me the truth, I said. Tears were sliding down my face now. 3 years. And you let me believe we were normal. That you were just a businessman and I was just your wife. Because you are just my wife, Adrian said desperately. And I wanted to be just your husband. I wanted us to have something real in a life I'd built on lies. I know that's selfish. I know I should have told you. But I was terrified you'd leave if you knew what I'd been. What I'd done. What have you done? I asked. Besides stealing technology and going dark from Russian intelligence. What else? The silence stretched between us. I've killed people, Isabel. The words landed like stones in water. Not recently. Not since I became Adrian Castellane and built legitimate businesses. But in my previous life as Alexander Koslov, I did things I can't take back. I eliminated threats. I destroyed lives. I was very good at my job. Which means I was very good at terrible things. I felt nauseous. This man beside me. The man who'd held me tenderly. Who'd cried at our wedding. who'd brought me coffee in bed on Sunday mornings. This man had killed people. The tracker, I said, changing focus before I drowned in the enormity of everything else. Why put a tracker in my bag? Because Marcus wasn't the first operative to make contact, Adrian explained. Just the boldest. There have been others over the years. Subtle approaches. I've shut them all down quietly. When Covenant became more aggressive, I needed real-time awareness of your movements to keep you safe. I should have asked permission. Should have told you. But telling you would have meant explaining everything. And I was a coward, I finished. You built a marriage on lies because you were afraid of the truth. Yes, Adrian admitted. His voice was broken. I was a coward when it came to you. I could face enemies and threats. But I couldn't face the possibility of you looking at me the way you're looking at me right now. With horror. With disgust. I don't know what I'm feeling, I said honestly. Horror, yes. Betrayal, absolutely. But also, I paused, searching for truth. Also understanding that you could have used me 1,000 different ways and didn't. That you protected my mother when you were supposed to kill her. That you're telling me everything now when you could have kept lying. What happens now? Adrian asked quietly. The car pulled into our building's private garage. We sat there. Engine off. Rain still falling outside. Now, I said, you show me everything. Every file. Every truth. Every ugly piece of who you were and who you are. And then I decide if the man I loved is real enough to fight for. Or if he's just another cover identity that needs to be retired. Adrian nodded. He looked devastated but accepting. Whatever you need. I'll show you everything. We went upstairs. To the penthouse that suddenly felt like a stranger's home. And Adrian opened his world to me completely. He took me to his study. The room I'd broken into hours earlier. But now he was opening it willingly. Showing me instead of me discovering it. Adrian went to his computer. Entered passwords. Unlocked encrypted servers. This is everything, he said. My real history. The operations I ran. The people I hurt. My actual family. He showed me photographs. A young woman with dark hair and Alexander's eyes. This is Katia. My sister. She was killed 7 years ago. Crossfire during an operation in Chechnya. She wasn't the target. Just wrong place, wrong time. His voice was hollow. My parents died when I was in training. My father had a heart attack. My mother followed 6 months later. The official cause was stroke, but I think it was grief. I'm alone in the world, Isabel. Except for you. You're the only family I have left. He showed me operational files. Missions he'd run decades ago. Intelligence he'd gathered. Technology he'd stolen. And yes, people he'd eliminated. Targets. Threats. Loose ends. The files were clinical. Detached. Reading them felt like reading about a stranger. This person, Alexander Koslov, felt separate from Adrian. And yet they were the same man. He showed me the protective surveillance on me. Not just the tracker. Security details I'd never noticed. Times I thought I'd gotten lucky missing a car that ran a red light. Close calls that weren't chance but intervention. You've been living in a protective bubble you never knew existed, Adrian said. I tried to make it invisible so you could feel free. That's not freedom, I replied. That's control dressed up as protection. I know, he said quietly. I'm sorry. We went through everything. Hours of files. Documents. Evidence. By the time we finished, dawn was breaking over Manhattan. Gray light filtering through the windows. I was exhausted. Emotionally devastated. Overwhelmed by information. I need time, I said finally. Away from you. From this penthouse. From all of it. I need to think without your presence influencing me. Adrian nodded. He looked destroyed but unsurprised. Where will you go? If I tell you, you'll have people watching. I'll have people watching anyway, Adrian admitted. To keep you safe, not to control you. But I won't contact you. I won't appear. I'll give you all the space you need. How do I know you're not manipulating me right now? I asked. Playing the penitent husband to keep me compliant? You don't, Adrian said simply. You can't know for certain. But I can tell you this. If I wanted to manipulate you, I wouldn't have shown you everything tonight. I would have fed you partial truths, maintained control of the narrative. I'm giving you the complete picture because you deserve agency. Even if that agency means choosing to leave. I stood, went to the bedroom, packed a bag. I'm going to my mother's care facility, I told him. I need to be somewhere that feels real. She won't remember you, Adrian said gently. Then he caught himself. Sorry. You know that. I care about you. I know, I said. That's what makes this so hard. If you were purely a monster, the choice would be simple. I left, and the penthouse echoed with my absence. The care facility was in Westchester. Clean, well-staffed, expensive in ways I could never have afforded before Adrian. Before Alexander. I didn't even know what to call him anymore. My mother was in the common room when I arrived. She sat by a window, looking at a garden she'd looked at 1,000 times but would never remember. Mom, I said, sitting beside her. She turned to me, smiled pleasantly. Hello, dear. Isn't it a lovely day? It is, I agreed. We looked through photo albums together. Pictures of my childhood, my father, my mother's career, the official story, not the intelligence truth. You were in love once, my mother said suddenly. The clarity came without warning, the way it sometimes did with Alzheimer's patients. I can see it in your face. But something broke. How can you tell? Because I've worn that expression, she replied. Her eyes were focused, present. When your father died, I thought I'd never feel whole again. But you learn that wholeness isn't about another person. It's about choosing who you become after the breaking. The moment of clarity faded. She returned to pleasant confusion, asking if I knew where the bathroom was, if I'd seen her sweater. But her words stayed with me. Choosing who you become after the breaking. I checked into a hotel near the facility. For 3 days I barely left the room. I ordered room service. I sat by the window. I thought about everything Adrian had revealed. I researched what I could verify independently. Alexander Koslov existed. Declassified documents mentioned him. A Russian operative who'd gone dark in 2009, presumed dead or compromised. Adrian Castellane's business empire was real. Legitimate, or at least convincingly so. His companies did actual work. Employed thousands of people. Generated real value. My mother's State Department career showed hints of more than administrative work in old records I found online. Travel to conflict zones. Security clearances higher than a secretary would need. So the broad strokes were true. But that didn't answer the real question. Was Adrian's love for me real? Or was I still, somehow, an assignment he'd never fully retired from? Marcus contacted me once. A text message. Made your decision yet? The offer stands if you want out. I didn't respond. On the 4th day, an envelope arrived at the hotel. Delivered by courier. Inside was a letter in Adrian's precise handwriting. Isabel, it began. I know I promised not to contact you, and I'm breaking that promise with this letter. I need you to understand something before you make your final decision. When I went dark from Russian intelligence, I took with me documentation of operations, identities, strategies, insurance against them coming after me directly. I've spent 15 years building legitimate businesses, trying to become someone worthy of the life I'd constructed. But the documentation still exists. It's leverage that keeps certain parties from moving against me. It's also information that could bring down networks, expose operations, save lives if given to the right people. I'm telling you this because I've made a decision. If you choose to leave, truly leave, not just take time but end our marriage completely, I'm going to turn over everything to U.S. intelligence. The documentation, my testimony, all of it. I'll cooperate fully, which will likely mean witness protection. A new identity. Disappearing from Adrian Castellane's life entirely. I'm doing this because I want you to be free. If the only thing keeping you in this marriage is fear of organizations like Covenant or concern about safety, I'm removing that obstacle. I'll trade everything I know for your permanent protection. They'll guard you because you're the wife of a high-value defector. Even if you're my ex-wife, you deserve a real life, Isabel. One where you can trust the person beside you. If I can't be that person, if I've broken trust too completely, then I want to give you freedom as my final gift. The choice is entirely yours. But know that whatever you decide, you'll be protected. Either by me if you choose to try to rebuild what we had, or by the full resources of U.S. intelligence if you choose to leave. I love you. That's the only truth that was never a lie. Adrian. I read the letter 3 times. For searching for manipulation. For the angle. But if it was manipulation, it was the strangest kind. Offering me a clear exit. Guaranteeing my safety. Promising to disappear if I wanted. I thought about our 3 years together. The way Adrian remembered how I took my coffee. His habit of leaving Miles Davis playing softly on Sunday mornings because my father had loved jazz. How he'd held me during my mother's worst days. I thought about the tracker in my bag, which now felt less like surveillance and more like a man terrified of losing what he loved. I thought about my mother's words. Choosing who you become after the breaking. I had 2 choices. Walk away from the wreckage of my marriage. Start over. Let Adrian disappear into witness protection and intelligence debriefings. Or walk back into the complexity, knowing my husband was a former operative with blood on his hands, and try to build something real from the broken pieces. Neither choice was wrong. Neither was right. They were just different futures. I picked up my phone, called Adrian. He answered on the first ring, sounding like he hadn't slept in days. Isabel, I read your letter, I said, and I have conditions. Anything. No more lies, I stated firmly. If something threatens me, you tell me instead of handling it silently. I get to choose whether to be protected or take risks. My agency isn't negotiable. Agreed. I want full access to everything. Your files. Your past. Your current operations, if there are any. No compartmentalization. Done. And I want you to turn over the intelligence documentation anyway. Not for me, but because it's the right thing to do. People deserve to know about the operations that affected their lives. Adrian was quiet for a long moment. That will make me vulnerable to retribution. I know. But if we're going to build something real, it has to be based on more than mutually assured destruction. It has to be based on actually trying to do better. You're asking me to give up my insurance policy. I'm asking you to trust that we can face whatever comes together, I said, instead of you controlling everything from the shadows. Another silence. If I do this, there will be consequences. People I've protected myself from will have openings. Covenant will be more aggressive. Others too. Then we face them together, I replied. As actual partners. Not as someone protecting their asset. Is that what we're doing? Adrian's voice was rough with hope. Trying again? Together? I thought about the tracker. About the lies. About 3 years of marriage built on deception. Then I thought about the man who'd chosen to protect my mother instead of killing her. About someone who'd been trained his whole life to manipulate but was choosing painful honesty now. I don't know if I can forgive everything, I admitted. I don't know if trust is fully reparable. But I know that the man I fell in love with, the one who remembered my grandmother's emerald, who built me a gallery, who held me through grief, that man was real. He exists underneath the operative. And I think he's worth fighting for. I love you, Adrian said. His voice was breaking. I will spend the rest of my life earning back what I damaged. Start by coming to pick me up, I said. We'll go to the intelligence services together. You're going to give them everything. And then we're going to figure out how to live a life that's actually ours. When Adrian arrived at the hotel, he looked different. Less polished billionaire. More real person. Vulnerable. Scared. Hopeful. We held each other in the parking lot. Rain starting to fall again, the way it always seemed to in this story. Both of us crying. I was so afraid I'd lost you, he whispered. You almost did, I replied. But I'm choosing to stay. To try. Don't make me regret it. Never, he promised. I swear on everything I am and everything I've done wrong. I will never lie to you again. We drove to the FBI's field office in Manhattan. Together, Adrian turned over everything. Decades of documentation. Operations that had shaped geopolitics. Names and locations and strategies. The debriefing would take months. Maybe years. There would be protection details. Security concerns. potential threats from organizations exposed by his cooperation. Our life was about to become extraordinarily complicated. But as we sat in the waiting room, hands clasped, I felt something I hadn't felt since finding the tracker. Hope. Not naive hope. Not the kind that ignored danger, but earned hope. The kind that came from choosing to rebuild after devastation. Adrian had been a spy, an operative, someone trained in deception. But he was also someone who'd chosen to protect rather than harm, who'd fallen in love and let it transform him, who was now willing to sacrifice his carefully constructed empire for a chance at something real. I had been a curator, someone who thought her life was simple and safe. But I was also my mother's daughter, someone whose blood carried resilience, who could face ugly truths and choose how to respond. Together we were starting over, not with lies and cover identities, but with painful honesty and shared risk. The FBI agent called Adrian's name. He stood, then looked back at me. Last chance to walk away. Stop giving me exits, I said. I already chose to stay. As Adrian disappeared into the debriefing room, I sat alone with my thoughts. The tracker was still in my bag. I kept it, a reminder of how I'd discovered the truth. But now it meant something different. Not evidence of control, but evidence of love expressed in the only way a damaged person knew how. I pulled out my phone, sent Marcus a message. I chose him, and we're burning down the secrets together. Covenant comes for us, you'll have competition. His response came quickly. Figured you might. Watch your back, Mrs. Castellane. The intelligence world doesn't forgive truth-tellers easily. Neither do I typed back. Which is why he's spending the rest of his life proving he's more than his worst choices. I put the phone away and settled in to wait. This was my life now. The wife of a former operative turned cooperating witness. The daughter of an intelligence officer. Someone who'd stumbled into a world of secrets and chosen to fight for truth inside it. It wasn't the quiet life I'd imagined. It was something far more complicated. Dangerous. Real. And as I sat in that FBI waiting room, tracker in my bag like a talisman, I realized I wouldn't trade it for anything. The breaking had been necessary. The rebuilding was where actual life began. Now, before I tell you what happened next, I need to know something. Do you think Isabel made the right choice? Would you have stayed or walked away? Drop your answer in the comments. I genuinely want to know. And if this story has had you on the edge of your seat, please hit that like button and subscribe. Because the final chapter of Isabel's journey is going to show you what real partnership looks like when it's built on truth instead of lies. 6 months passed. 6 months of FBI debriefings. Of Adrian spending hours, sometimes days, in secure facilities providing testimony. Of our lives being dissected by intelligence analysts. The new gallery opened in Brooklyn. Far from the Manhattan penthouse. Far from the life of Adrian Castellane, billionaire CEO. That life was over. Adrian had stepped down from his companies as part of the intelligence cooperation. Placed them in trusts that would fund humanitarian efforts. The man who emerged from months of debriefings was someone different. Quieter. More grounded. Carrying his past more visibly. We'd moved to a brownstone in Brooklyn. Anonymous and normal. With security that I could now see and participate in choosing. Adrian worked as a consultant for the FBI's cybersecurity division, using his knowledge for protection rather than infiltration. And I had returned to what I loved, discovering artists, building exhibitions, creating space for beauty. The opening night was small, intimate, celebrating a Colombian sculptor whose work explored themes of identity and reconstruction. I moved through the crowd, genuinely happy in ways I'd forgotten were possible during the months of revelation and rebuilding. Adrian stood to the side, watching me with obvious pride. He was learning how to be a person rather than a cover identity. And it showed in small ways. The way he laughed more easily now. The way he asked for help instead of pretending to know everything. The way he let me see his uncertainty. You two seem happy, a voice said beside me. I turned to find Marcus. Wine in hand, dressed appropriately for an art opening, like he belonged. What are you doing here? I asked, immediately wary. Attending an exhibition, Marcus said mildly. I do actually appreciate art. Plus, I wanted to see how the dramatic conclusion turned out. Covenant's not pleased, by the way. Adrian's cooperation damaged some significant operations. Am I supposed to apologize? Not at all. I respect the play. You chose trust over safety, and somehow it worked out. That's rare in our world. This isn't my world, I corrected. I'm just adjacent to it. You're more part of it than you think, Marcus observed. Daughter of intelligence. Wife of a defector. Someone who now knows enough to be useful or dangerous depending on perspective. You'll never be fully civilian again. I felt the truth of that settle uncomfortably. Then I'll learn to navigate it. On my terms. That's the spirit. Marcus raised his glass. To navigating complicated truths. And to marriages that survive them. After he left, Adrian appeared at my elbow. Should I be worried he's here? Probably always, I said. But not tonight. Tonight we're just celebrating art. We stood together watching people engage with the sculptures, talking and laughing, finding meaning in the artist's exploration of identity. It was the most normal evening we'd had in months, and it felt precious because of that. As the event wound down, Isabel and Adrian walked home through Brooklyn streets. Our security detail was invisible but present. The September air was cool, hinting at autumn. Everything felt like transition. Do you regret it? Adrian asked suddenly. Staying? Choosing this complicated mess instead of a clean exit? I thought about it honestly. Sometimes I regret not knowing. There are moments I miss the simplicity of thinking you were just a billionaire who happened to fall for me. But then I remember that was never real. This us now, with all the ugly truth, this is real. And I'd rather have real complexity than beautiful lies. Even when real complexity includes FBI debriefings and Covenant operatives at gallery openings. Even then, I took his hand. Because you're actually here now. Not Alexander pretending to be Adrian. Just you. Whoever you are underneath all the identities. I'm still figuring that out, Adrian admitted. Spent so many years being what others needed me to be. I'm not sure who I am when no one's watching. Then we'll figure it out together, I said. That's what actual partnership looks like. We reached our brownstone. As Adrian unlocked the door, I felt gratitude for the breaking that had led to this rebuilding. The tracker was framed on my desk upstairs now. A reminder that discovery, painful, shattering discovery, could be the beginning rather than the end. Inside, we made dinner together, talking about the exhibition, about the Colombian sculptor's upcoming projects, about normal things that felt extraordinary because we'd almost lost the chance to have them. I love this, Adrian said, washing dishes while I dried. This domestic simplicity. I spent decades in elaborate deceptions, and this, just being here with you, doing mundane things, this is what I was really searching for. It's not always going to be simple, I warned. There will be complications from your cooperation. Threats, probably. Definitely more unexpected visitors like Marcus. I know, but we'll face it together. No more secrets. No more silent protection. Full partnership. That night, lying in bed in our Brooklyn brownstone, I thought about the journey from that moment in the closet, holding a tracker, feeling my world collapse, to here. I'd discovered my husband was a former spy. My mother had been intelligence. My entire marriage had been built on a foundation of deception. But I'd also discovered that people were more than their worst choices. That transformation was possible. That trust could be rebuilt from rubble if both people were willing to do the work. The tracker had revealed everything about Adrian. But in revealing everything, it had also revealed what I was capable of. Facing ugly truths, making difficult choices, demanding agency, choosing complexity over comfortable lies. I was stronger than I'd known, braver, more resilient. What are you thinking? Adrian asked in the darkness. That I'm glad I found the tracker, I said honestly, even though it destroyed everything I thought I knew. Because what we have now, this honest, complicated, hard-won partnership, this is worth more than beautiful lies ever were. Adrian pulled me closer. Thank you for staying, for choosing to try, for being brave enough to demand truth even when it was ugly. Thank you for becoming someone worth staying for, I replied. We fell asleep like that, wrapped in each other, in our normal Brooklyn brownstone, with our complicated truths and our hard-won hope. The tracker sat framed on my desk, catching moonlight through the window, a reminder that discovery changes everything. And sometimes, devastatingly, beautifully, that's exactly what needs to happen. 2 years later, the farmhouse in upstate New York was nothing like the Manhattan penthouse or even the Brooklyn brownstone. It was rustic, secluded, surrounded by land that rolled in gentle hills, far from the complications of our former life. I stood on the porch, 7 months pregnant, watching a scene that filled me with joy I couldn't have imagined 2 years ago. Adrian was teaching our daughter how to feed the chickens. Sophia was 5 years old. We'd adopted her from foster care a year ago, a little girl with dark curls and eyes that had seen too much too young. She'd stolen both our hearts immediately. This was our life now, quiet, intentional, built from choice rather than circumstance. Adrian still consulted for the FBI, but remotely, on his terms. I had published a book about art and identity that had become unexpectedly successful. We downsized from empire to enough, from visibility to privacy, from performance to genuine existence. Covenant had made one attempt at retaliation, quickly shut down by the protective apparatus Adrian's cooperation had earned. Marcus sent a card when Sophia's adoption was finalized. "Congratulations on your real life. Guard it better than you did the false one." We did guard it, carefully, consciously, with full awareness of how precious and fragile it was. My mother had passed away 6 months ago, her Alzheimer's finally taking her completely, but there had been one final moment of clarity. She'd looked at me and said, "You found your way. I'm proud." Those had been her last coherent words, and I treasured them. Now, watching Adrian and Sophia, this man who'd been trained to deceive learning to be a father, this child who'd been abandoned learning to trust, I felt complete in ways that had nothing to do with another person and everything to do with the life I'd chosen to build. "Mama," Sophia called, running up the porch steps. "The chickens made 6 eggs. Papa says we can make breakfast." "Sounds perfect," I said, scooping her up despite my growing belly. Adrian kissed me. "Domestic and simple. This is everything. You know that, right? This simple life, it's everything I never knew I was searching for." "I know," I replied, "because it's real. Finally, completely real." We went inside together. Former spy, former curator, adopted daughter, baby on the way, to make breakfast from chicken eggs, to live our magnificently simple truth. The tracker was long gone, donated to a museum exhibition on surveillance and privacy. Its purpose had been served. It had revealed the truth and set in motion the transformation that led to this. My phone buzzed with a message from my gallery manager about an upcoming exhibition. Normal work, normal life, normal complications that had nothing to do with espionage or deception. Isabel and Sophia walked back from the chickens, Sophia chattering about eggs and feathers, Adrian listening with patient attention that came from someone learning how to be present. We gathered in the kitchen, the kind of kitchen you see in magazines about country living. Warm, lived in, real. Sophia helped crack eggs into a bowl, getting more shell in than egg, but we didn't care. Adrian made coffee. I set the table. This was the extraordinary thing we'd built from devastation. Not wealth, not power, not the revenge I could have taken. Just this. Family. A real one. Built on truth and choice and hard-won love. "Can I tell you what I've learned?" I said to Adrian as we sat down to eat. "Always," he replied. "I've learned that the worst moments of our lives can become doorways if we're brave enough to walk through them. Finding that tracker was the worst day of my life. It destroyed everything I believed. But it also freed me from a beautiful prison. I've learned that people are more complicated than their worst actions. You did terrible things as Alexander Koslov. But you also chose to protect instead of kill. You chose love over mission. You chose to become better. I've learned that trust, once broken, can be rebuilt. But it requires more than apologies. It requires complete honesty, consistent action, time. And I've learned that the most radical thing we can do is choose to become who we want to be instead of letting our past define us. Adrian was quiet. Then he said, I've learned that love isn't what I thought it was. I thought it was a weakness, a liability, something that could be exploited. But love is what saved me. Your love gave me a reason to become real, to stop performing, to actually transform instead of just pretending. Sophia looked between us. Are you being mushy again? We laughed. Yes, I told her. Very mushy. You'll have to get used to it. After breakfast, Adrian went to work in his home office, consulting work for the FBI, helping them understand networks he'd once been part of. Sophia played in the yard, building elaborate structures from sticks and stones, creating whole worlds in her imagination. And I sat on the porch with my laptop, working on my second book. This one about transformation and resilience. The life we'd built wasn't perfect. There were still complications, security concerns, occasional threats that required increased vigilance. The reality that we'd never be fully free of the world Adrian had once inhabited. But it was real, and real, I'd learned, was worth more than perfect. My sister called. We'd rebuilt our relationship over the past 2 years. Slowly, carefully. She'd apologized for believing the worst of me during my divorce from my assumptions about my life. We talked about normal things now. Her work, my pregnancy, plans for Thanksgiving, family, chosen and rebuilt. Another thing I'd learned was possible after breaking. That evening, as the sun set over our property, turning everything golden, Adrian and I sat on the porch while Sophia played nearby. I never thought I'd have this, Adrian said quietly. Family, a real life, the chance to be someone other than a cover identity. Do you miss it? I asked. The power, the wealth, the Adrian Castellane empire. No, he said immediately. That was impressive, but it was hollow. He gestured at Sophia, at our modest farmhouse, at me. This is the first real thing I've ever had. Even knowing the complications, the ongoing security concerns, the fact that we'll probably never be completely safe, especially knowing that, Adrian replied, because we chose this with full knowledge. There's no deception, no hidden agenda, just two people who decided to build something real from broken pieces. Sophia ran up. Papa, will you push me on the swing? Of course, sweetheart. As I watched him push our daughter on the swing we'd hung from the old oak tree, I thought about the woman I'd been 2 years ago, the one who found a tracker and felt her world ending. That woman would barely recognize me now. She'd been afraid, controlled, living in a beautiful cage she didn't even see. Now I was free, truly free, not because I'd escaped Adrian, but because I'd demanded truth and he'd chosen to give it. My phone rang. Unknown number. I answered cautiously. Isabel Castellane? A woman's voice. Yes, this is Agent Chun from the FBI. I'm calling to inform you that we've received a credible threat against your family from remnants of the Covenant network. We're implementing additional security protocols effective immediately. My heart rate spiked. What kind of threat? Details are classified, but we take it seriously. A team will be at your location within the hour. You'll have 24-hour protection until the threat is neutralized. Understood. Thank you for the warning. I hung up, walked to where Adrian was pushing Sophia. We have a situation, I said quietly. His expression shifted immediately. Back to the operative assessing threats. What kind? FBI just called. Covenant threat. Team arriving within the hour. He nodded, lifted Sophia off the swing. Hey sweetheart, we're gonna have some visitors. Remember the safe room we showed you? Like a game? Sophia asked. Exactly like a game. We went inside. Adrian activated security protocols, locked down the property. Within 40 minutes, a team of federal agents arrived. This was our life now. Beautiful simplicity interrupted by danger from a past that wouldn't fully let go. But as we sat in the reinforced safe room, Sophia playing with her dolls, completely unconcerned because she trusted us to keep her safe, Adrian holding my hand, I realized something. This was still better than the beautiful lie, because we were facing it together, with full knowledge, as partners. The The threat was neutralized 3 days later. Covenant operatives arrested before they could act. But the incident was a reminder. Our peace was hard-won and would require constant vigilance. Is this sustainable? I asked Adrian after the federal agents left. Living with ongoing threats. Raising children in this environment? Adrian was quiet. Then he said, I can disappear completely. Full witness protection. New identities. We could start over somewhere they'd never find us. And lose everything we've built? Our careers? Our connections? Our identity? I'm saying the option exists. If this becomes too much. I thought about it. Really considered it. A life of complete anonymity. Safety purchased through erasure. No, I said finally. I won't let fear make me small again. We'll take precautions. We'll stay vigilant. But we'll live our lives. That's the whole point, isn't it? Not just surviving, but actually living. Adrian smiled. When did you become the brave one? I learned from watching you choose to be real instead of safe. Over the next months, we settled into a new normal. Enhanced security. Regular check-ins with FBI. Training on threat awareness. But also Sophia's 6th birthday party. Preparations for the baby. Gallery exhibitions. Book launches. Ordinary life layered over extraordinary circumstances. And then our son was born. We named him Thomas, after my father. He had Adrian's dark hair and my eyes. When I held him for the first time, I cried. Not from pain or fear, but from overwhelming gratitude that this life, this complicated, dangerous, beautiful life was mine. Adrian sat beside my hospital bed, holding Sophia, looking at our son with wonder. I never thought I deserved this, he said quietly. You didn't, I replied honestly. But you became someone who does. That's what matters. The first year of Thomas's life passed in a blur of sleepless nights and small joys. Sophia adjusted to being a big sister. Adrian learned to change diapers and make bottles. I balanced motherhood with work. And slowly, gradually, the threats diminished. Covenant's network dismantled by international cooperation. The danger that had shadowed us fading into background noise. We'd survived. More than survived. We'd built something that lasted. On our 5th wedding anniversary, Adrian and I took a weekend away. Just the two of us. My sister watched the children. We went to a small inn in Vermont. Nothing fancy. Just quiet and private. On our last evening, sitting by a fire, Adrian said, I need to tell you something. I felt familiar fear spike. What? Nothing bad, he said quickly. Just something I've been thinking about. He took my hand. When I found that tracker in your bag, when you discovered everything, I thought my life was over. I thought I'd lose you and that would be the punishment I deserved for all the lies. But instead, losing the lies saved us. Saved me. Made everything real. I've spent these 5 years becoming someone new. Not Alexander Koslov, the operative. Not Adrian Castellane, the cover identity. Just Adrian. Your husband. Sophia and Thomas's father. And I realized something. That's who I actually am now. The roles aren't performance anymore. They're real. You gave me that. By demanding truth. By refusing to accept beautiful lies. By choosing to rebuild instead of run. I don't know that I gave you anything, I said. You chose to change. That was your decision. You gave me a reason to choose it. Without you, I'd still be the operative. Powerful and successful and completely hollow. We sat in comfortable silence. The fire crackling. Snow falling outside. Do you ever wish things had been different? Adrian asked. That we'd met normally? Without all the deception? No, I said. And I meant it. Because normal meeting doesn't forge what we have. We had to break completely to rebuild into something real. The deception was terrible, but it led to truth. And truth is what I wanted all along. Even painful truth? Especially painful truth. Because anything else is just a prettier cage. The next morning we drove home. Back to our farmhouse. Back to our children. Back to our complicated, beautiful, real life. Sophia ran to greet us. Thomas toddled behind her. The house smelled like the cookies my sister had made with them. This was everything. Not the penthouse. Not the empire. Not the wealth or power or prestige. This family, truth, love earned through honesty. And it was enough. More than enough. Years passed. Sophia grew into a brilliant, curious teenager. Thomas became a thoughtful, artistic child. Our life continued, ordinary and extraordinary at once. Adrian's past faded into history. The occasional interview with intelligence agencies. Consultations on cybersecurity. But mostly he was just a husband, a father, person, and I continued my work, curating exhibitions, writing books, creating space for beauty and truth. The tracker, that tiny device that had unraveled everything, sat framed in my office, a reminder of where we'd been, what we'd survived. Sophia asked about it once. She was 14. "Mom, what is that?" I told her the truth, because truth was what we built our family on. I told her about finding it, about discovering that her father had been someone completely different, about the choice to stay or leave, about choosing to rebuild. She listened with wide eyes. Then she said, "You're braver than I thought." "I'm not brave," I corrected. "I'm just someone who refused to accept a beautiful lie when I could have a complicated truth." "That's what brave means," Sophia said. Maybe she was right. Now, as I finish telling you this story, I want you to understand something important. Isabel's story, my story, teaches us profound truths about trust, betrayal, and transformation. First, discovery can be devastating and necessary. Sometimes the truth that breaks us is the truth that frees us. The tracker was painful to find, but it revealed a life built on deception. Without that discovery, I would have lived in a beautiful prison forever. Real love requires real truth. Second, people are more than their worst choices. Adrian had blood on his hands, built an empire on lies, but he also chose to protect instead of kill. He chose love over mission. He chose sacrifice over self-preservation. We're defined not by our past, but by who we choose to become. Third, agency is everything. I didn't stay because I had no choice. I didn't leave because I was afraid. I investigated, gathered information, made demands. My choice to stay was powerful because I could have left. True partnership requires equal agency. Fourth, rebuilding is harder than breaking. Finding the tracker took seconds. Rebuilding trust took years. But the life built on truth was worth more than the one built on lies. Real happiness isn't absence of problems. It's presence of meaning. Fifth, sometimes the simple life is the ultimate success. We went from Manhattan penthouse to upstate farmhouse. From billionaire empire to enough. From performance to authenticity. True wealth isn't what you own. It's who you become and who you build with. If you're in a situation where you're questioning trust, remember you deserve truth. If you've discovered painful secrets, remember the breaking can be the beginning. If you're rebuilding after devastation, remember real love built on honesty is worth more than perfect love built on lies. I found a tracker. What it revealed was beyond imagination. But what I built from that revelation was entirely within my power. And that's the real story. Not what was done to me, but who I chose to become. The tracker revealed secrets I never imagined. But my response revealed strength I never knew I had. That's the story worth telling. That's the lesson worth learning. If the story moved you, if it made you think about trust and truth in your own life, I need you to do something for me. Hit that like button to show this story resonated. Drop a comment telling me, would you have stayed or left? What would your conditions have been? I genuinely want to know your thoughts. Subscribe to Love Stories with Dr. Stone for more incredible journeys of love, loss, and transformation. Stories that don't just entertain, but teach us something about ourselves. Share this video with someone who needs to hear that devastating discovery can lead to beautiful transformation. That the breaking isn't the end. It's the beginning. Because here's what I want you to remember. The tracker revealed that my billionaire husband was a former spy. That our meeting was manufactured. That everything I believed was built on lies. But it also revealed that transformation is possible. That truth can be rebuilt from lies. That the most extraordinary life is sometimes the quietest one. Chosen deliberately, guarded fiercely, lived honestly. I am Isabel Moreau Castellane. I found a tracker. What it revealed changed everything. And in the wreckage of revelation, I discovered exactly who I was meant to become. Real love isn't perfect love. Real love is honest love. Even when the truth shatters everything you thought you knew. Thank you for listening to my story. Until next time, this is Dr. Stone reminding you that your life is your story. Make sure you're the one writing it, not anyone else. You. Choose truth. Choose agency. Choose to become who you want to be after the breaking. Because that's where real life begins.